Hey there, AgEcon. Welcome back to today's presentation, which is all about risk. So every day we take risks, and this is why I really love teaching about risk and the idea of risk, because this is, again, another topic in AgEcon that you will be using for the rest of your life and throughout the class. So today we're going to get started by looking at a picture of a really tasty hamburger that's going to get our brain flowing, but also maybe our taste buds a little bit hungry. That's okay. Then we're going to dive into risking it for the brisket as we look at the different types and definitions for the word risk. Then we're going to look at one of the best ways for mitigating risk, and that is insurance. So we are going to check if we are sure about insurance by brushing up on some key terminology. And then finally, we're going to get some practice with managing risk. And since this is an agriculture economics course, what better way to teach about insurance than through looking at crop insurance? So I'm going to teach you a little bit about crop insurance and the different events that a farmer could possibly forego or notice when they are planting or harvesting their crops. So determining whether or not we should insure based on a variety of different factors is a key thing that farmers and agriculturalists are doing. So let's join in and take a look at today's learning targets. So first, you'll be able to compare and contrast the different types of risk. You'll be able to explain how risk is applied to food and ag businesses. You'll be able to describe how insurance is a risk mitigation strategy. And you'll be able to create and justify decisions of risk using quantitative data and the risk matrix tool. Okay. All right. So the first thing, as promised, we have this nice, tasty picture of a burger. Okay, I want you to, after I give instructions, I want you to hit pause, and I want you to take out a piece of paper, open up a blank Google Doc, and write down at least 5 things that come to mind when you look at this hamburger. Okay, these can be any 5 things that you think of when you look at this burger. Okay, so go ahead, hit pause, and we'll reconvene. All right. So now that we've had time to think about the 5 things that come to our minds when we look at this hamburger, I'd encourage you to potentially listen into what I'm going to say and see maybe if there's some things that correlate with what you have written down, or maybe process further with a family member or with a classmate if you know someone in class that is also working on this activity right now. Okay, so here are the 5 things that I had in my mind. Okay, first, juicy. I love a thick, juicy hamburger. This looks super delicious, super juicy. Okay, the second one I had down is nutrition. Okay, so we have a nice protein source there with the meat, obviously. We have vegetables, which are going to be packed with essential vitamins that I need to stay healthy and strong. We also have carbohydrates here, which are going to give me energy and help me to be strong and have the energy to get through my busy, jam-packed evening after I eat this tasty, delicious hamburger. Okay, so the third thing I had written down in addition to these 2 is restaurant. So generally speaking, I'm going to be eating a burger either in my home or in a restaurant, and this just looks more like a burger I'd probably see at a restaurant versus the way I would dress a burger at my home. So that's why I thought of restaurant for the third one. Fourth, obviously I'm an egg teacher. I'm going to think of this farmer. Okay, no matter what we eat, it has to start from a farmer, whether we choose to eat plant-based foods or animal-based foods. Everything starts at the farm. Okay, so the 4th thing I thought of was farmer or farm. And 5th is pink. The reason why I say pink is because I like my burgers to have just a little bit of pink in the middle. I'm definitely that guy who loves eating steak, but I can't eat it where it's so raw that it looks like you can hear it mooing, basically. Like, I don't like that. I'm not a big fan of that at all. Same thing with my burgers. I like it just to be a little pink in the middle, just so I have that jam-packed juice flavor with my meat. So those are the 5 things that I thought of. And maybe these 5 things that you wrote down are pretty similar. Maybe they were a little bit more obvious, like lettuce, or maybe you wrote down saucy or things like that. But that's okay. No matter what those 5 things are, hopefully they kind of connect back to what we're going to talk about here today, and that's risk. So no matter what we choose to do in our daily lives, we are always going to be faced with risk. And there are a lot of different definitions for the term risk. I'm going to provide a couple of them to you today that will be pretty applicable for us moving forward. But choosing to eat this hamburger is definitely a risk. And we're going to look back at this hamburger example frequently throughout the rest of the presentation today. So keep those 5 words that you had written down, or 5 things that you had written down close to your computer as you continue to listen up to today's presentation. Okay, so I'm going to start us off with a little bit of a comic that I found on the internet. Okay, so taking risk. There's a fine line between taking a calculated risk and doing something dumb. Now, if I go to a restaurant and I order a burger with a little bit of pink in the middle, that's what I would call taking a calculated risk, right? Obviously, there's a little bit of pink in the middle that heightens my potential to get a foodborne illness potentially. But doing something dumb would be going into your fridge or freezer at home and eating a pound of raw hamburger. Okay, that's just asking for problems. So there is a difference between taking a calculated risk with strong evidence and statistics to back you up in your decision making and just going out and being plain stupid. Okay, so I don't want you to get scared by what we're going to be talking about today, but just know that there is a difference between being stupid and taking a calculated risk. And everything that we do, every decision that we make, generally involves taking a risk of some sort. Okay, so risking it for the brisket. Personally, I like brisket more than I like biscuit, so I always say risk it for the brisket instead of risk it for the biscuit. Personal preference, some people say risk it for the biscuit. But at the end of the day, one of the main definitions for risk that I personally prefer is the potential of losing something of value. And in a minute, I'm going to talk about uncertainty, and uncertainty and risk kind of go hand in hand too, and that's where the second definition could come in. But risk is the potential of losing something of value. When you choose to eat a hamburger, if you value your personal health and your well-being, you are potentially taking a risk, right? You are taking a risk because if you get sick from that hamburger, you are taking a risk, right? That is something, your health is something you're giving up if you get sick. Okay, so values then can be gained or lost when taking a risk resulting from an action, activity, or inaction, whether this is foreseen or unforeseen. Okay, so when you choose to bite into that burger at Applebee's and it tastes super good, you don't think anything's wrong with it, but then you go home or maybe the next day and you start getting sick and you're throwing up, or maybe you have some other symptoms that signify having a foodborne illness or getting sick as a result of eating that burger that seemed to be tasty or delicious. You then played with risk and you unfortunately lost. You got sick, right? So you lost the value of your personal health. However, on the flip side, if you don't get sick, but you had a great night with friends out at Applebee's, you could have gained, right? You could have gained value, whether that's through social interaction or through having a tasty burger that's given you the fuel and energy to continue on with the rest of your day or evening or what have you. You could have gained value as a result of that, taking that risk. Okay, so risk can either be good or maybe not so good. So it's important to look at both sides. Examples of values that we could have include physical health, social status, emotional well-being, or maybe even wealth. So those are things that we could potentially sacrifice during a risk, okay? Risk can also be defined as the intentional interaction with uncertainty. Okay, so this gets a little bit more complicated. That's why I like to lean more towards that first definition of losing something of value. But risk is the intentional interaction with uncertainty, according to some economists. Uncertainty then is a potential, unpredictable, unmeasurable, and uncontrollable outcome. So again, if you are uncertain of whether or not you're going to get sick from eating a hamburger, which generally speaking, you can never be 100% confident that you are going to go into a restaurant and walk out not being sick. I mean, there's always going to be some level of uncertainty there, whether that be someone like spitting in the food or maybe not reaching the perfect internal temperature when being prepared, but it still looks to be brown or completely done when you're eating it and well cooked. You're always going to be dealing with uncertainty at some point. So risk is a consequence of action taken in spite of uncertainty. So by eating that burger and sinking your teeth into that burger and not knowing whether or not it's going to make you sick or whether it's not going to make you sick is a risk because you are playing with uncertainty. Okay. So I also like this little comic strip I have over to the right. Businessmen thrive on risk, being bold, taking chances. So why aren't you investing now? There's too much uncertainty, right? So business people, people like you and me, maybe if we don't own a business, but we just go out to Applebee's and enjoy a burger or two, we all are playing with risk every day. So it's an important and fundamental concept to understand before we continue into the class. So on the next slide, I have a variety of different outcomes or events that could happen, and it's something versus contracting a foodborne illness. So it could be about a motorcycle accident or an airplane crash or hypothermia. There's 10 different options compared to a foodborne illness or foodborne bacteria. And we're comparing this in terms of death. So on the following slide, please evaluate the outcomes in terms of your perception of the risk relative to dying from a foodborne bacteria. This includes pathogens like Salmonella and E. coli, etc. And I want you to guess the outcome that you believe an individual has a greater chance of dying from in the US. Don't necessarily worry about the 1 in blank versus 1 in blank odds and everything onto the right-hand side. I want you just to take a minute to identify which one you think you have a greater chance of dying from, whether it be foodborne bacteria or the other outcome that's listed there. So go ahead, here's the list. Take about 30 seconds or so, pause the video, identify which event you think has a greater chance of killing you. All right. So now that we have identified the events that we think have a greater potential of harming or killing us in the United States, I'm here to share that 5 out of the 10 of these events have a greater chance of killing us than foodborne bacteria, okay? Those 5 are drug overdose, smoke or fire, motorcycle ride, falling on the stairs, or assault by firearm. So those 5 events have a greater chance of statistically killing somebody in the United States versus a foodborne bacteria. So generally speaking, we do have risk every time we choose to eat out at a restaurant or cook our own meals at home. Every time we eat food, we are playing with uncertainty. Therefore, we are incurring a risk. And that risk is foodborne bacteria. Okay, so some things obviously like drug overdose, smoke or fire, motorcycle ride, falling on the stairs, and assault by firearm. These are all things that we have a potentially greater risk of dying from statistically, according to this data that I received from the internet. But it's important to know that we have a 1 in 271,776 chance of dying from a foodborne bacteria or foodborne illness in the United States in any given year, which generally speaking, for some people, that's kind of scary. But again, we are taking a calculated risk when we are choosing to eat a hamburger that may have a little bit of pink in the middle, or a steak that might be cooked medium instead of medium well or well done. That is a calculated risk. You have a greater chance of dying from a foodborne illness if you just do something plain old stupid, right? Like going in and eating a pound of raw hamburger, like that analogy we've been coming back to throughout the night. Okay, so generally speaking, if you are doing the right things, if you're being sanitary in your actions, if you are making sure that your food is being cooked to the proper internal temperature, you greatly lower your risk of having foodborne bacteria, and therefore are taking the steps to mitigating that risk. And we're going to talk about risk mitigation in the form of insurance here in a little bit, but hopefully this kind of opens your eyes to the idea that yes, foodborne bacteria is something that is definitely a risk and something that we're supposed to be keeping an eye out for, but there's some things on here too, like falling on the stairs, motorcycle ride, smoke or fire, drug overdose, and assault by firearm that do have a higher calculated risk of causing us to die in the United States. But with all of these things, there are definitely actions we could take to prevent these issues from resulting in death, right? Okay. This is called a matrix, and a matrix basically compares 2 different things with all the potential outcomes that we could have. Kind of like what we saw from a decision-making matrix in Unit 1. This matrix compares the likelihood of an event and the consequences of that event. And this helps us decide what decisions to make when encountering risk. And we're going to be referring to this when we do our crop insurance activity here in a little bit. But the way to read this is, let's say that we have likelihoods that are certain, likely, moderate, unlikely, or rare. These are all on the basis of percent likelihood or percent chance of happening. So if we are 90% or more certain that something is going to happen, we're going to be looking in this row. Okay. Then we're going to look at our consequences. And these range anything from insignificant to catastrophic. And the way that this particular matrix is set up is based off of delaying in terms of a schedule or time schedule, or potentially budget or money lost as a result. Okay, so insignificant is generally going to be something like some type of consequence that is not very, as the name says, significant or relevant or important, whereas catastrophic could mean project abandonment completely. So anywhere in between, so we have 10%, 30%, 50%, or greater than 50%. And then basically you go down and you find the correct cell that matches the lineup of the consequence and the likelihood. So for example, let's say that we have a moderate chance of something to occur, and a moderate consequence, the risk level would be said to be high. Okay, so we're going to get some practice using this matrix here in a little bit, but this is a tool that we can utilize to help calculate and forecast our risks in a business. So there's two types of risks that I want to introduce you to today, subjective and objective. Subjective risks are things that are classified on non-calculated basis and are based on opinions and feelings rather than science or data or evidence. So an example of this would be Friday the 13th. So all of the people out there who have these superstitions about events that happen on Friday the 13th, those are all subjective and are not necessarily based on science or fact. Therefore, they're more opinion and therefore subjective risks. Objective risks, on the other hand, are risks that can be easily calculated and based on concrete data. So an example would be a property insurer having 10,000 houses insured over a long period and on average 1% burn each year. So that would equate to be about 100 houses per year. That is an objective risk. So that when they, as an insurance company, are marketing their insurance policies, they can say that 1% of houses burn each year, and that is why we are issuing this specific rate on our insurance. Okay. So now this leads in perfectly to talking about insurance. Insurance, as Elf says, Buddy the Elf, I love insurance. Insurance is my favorite. It might not be your personal favorite, but it's an important topic to know about, especially as you get your first big boy and big girl jobs. Insurance is defined as a contract represented by a policy in which an individual or a business receives financial protection or reimbursement. Okay, the insurance company pools clients' risks to make payments more affordable for the insured clients. Okay, so basically these big insurance companies like State Farm Insurance or Progressive Insurance basically collect money from individuals, and this is known as a premium, which we'll talk about in a little bit. They collect these premiums on a monthly or annual basis, and then all those premiums get put into a big pot, and then when there is an emergency that occurs for one specific person who is bought into this insurance policy, they then are able to get monetary assistance from the insurance company to help alleviate those costs. Now, some insurance companies issue what is called a deductible. And for life insurance, for health insurance, for home and auto insurance, generally speaking, there is some sort of deductible that is incurred up front. A deductible is essentially the amount of money that is paid after some type of accident or incident is incurred before the insurance company pays the rest. So basically, if you get into a car accident and your truck gets totaled, or maybe just a little bit of damage, the insurance company is going to issue a deductible, which means you need to pay this much money and then we will pay the rest for you. And that is only to people who have insurance. So if you do not have a certain type of insurance and you get into an accident, you're stuck footing the entire bill, and that can get very, very expensive. And that's why insurance companies pool money together from a lot of different people to help lower those costs and those values for the whole entire group overall. Okay, so the important thing to know here too is that many crop insurance policy deductibles are generally low and sometimes even non-existent because we can't really control the weather, right? We can't really control if there's going to be hail or rain or an early freeze or maybe even a tornado. But when we are stuck in traffic, right, we can sometimes take into consideration, am I going to be speeding or am I not going to be speeding? Am I going to be tailgating this person or am I not going to be tailgating this person? So with crop insurance, there's generally not as many deductibles to be incurred because those types of businesses or those types of entities, generally speaking, are a little bit more flexible with farmers in that a lot of elements there are very uncertain. Okay. A premium, then, last vocab word, is the amount of money that is paid for an insurance policy on a monthly or annual basis. Once earned, the premium is income for the insurance company. It represents a liability as the insurer must provide coverage for claims being made against the policy. So if Billy Bob has an insurance policy through State Farm, gets in an accident or a fender bender, he may have to pay $200 up front, but because he was paying those premiums and was an active paying member of this insurance policy, the insurance company will cover the rest of the costs for him after that initial deductible. Okay. So there's a lot of different ways premiums are determined, and they're based on many factors, including the type of coverage. So is this for your car or for your body as a human, or is it for your house? Age is also a big thing, and maybe even gender. I know for me, when I was 16 or 17 years old, and I obviously am a male and I drove a red truck, my insurance was a lot higher. Granted, I had a pretty good GPA in high school. It still didn't cover as much as it would have been if I would have been a female and maybe driving a green car, right? So there's a lot of different factors that go into play in determining the premium that you're going to be paying for your insurance. Geographic location and any claims filed in the past too, right? So if I keep getting in car accidents, my premium is probably going to be a little bit higher than if I have a clean record and I've never gotten into a car accident before, because I'm more liable, right? If I'm a member of that insurance policy and I keep getting into accidents, I'm more statistically likely to keep getting in accidents, therefore costing the insurance company more money, so they have the right to charge me more for a premium. Okay. There are many types of insurance, and I've alluded to many of these already, including life, healthcare, and disability, crop, home, and auto. Okay. So there's a lot of words here. We're going to start getting into a little bit of how to calculate and manage our risks now that we know about what risks are. And this is kind of the whole case study here. So I'm going to read this. Those two top lines you're not going to see again, so it's going to be very important that you understand what this is saying. So you are a farmer in Todd County with 100 acres of a corn soybean rotation. Use the matrix and the independent scenarios to determine the risk level. Okay, so I have 5 scenarios. These scenarios will be copy paste into the following slides with a copy of the matrix table that you'll see on the next slide, and you will be able to calculate or determine the amount of risk involved in each of these scenarios. Okay, and then I want you to determine if it's going to be a low, medium, high, or extreme level of risk, and I want you to determine if you would buy crop insurance based off of that independent scenario only. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is, again, that risk table. You're going to see this on every single slide moving forward. Why don't we do this first one together, and then I'll have you do the final 4 on your own. All right. In 8 out of 10 years, a major weather event, think hail or tornado, has destroyed an estimated average of 30 acres each year. And remember, you have 100 acres of a corn-soybean rotation. Okay, so that means in 8 out of the last 10 years, you have had a major weather event that has destroyed, on average, 30 out of your 100 acres. Okay, so the risk level, the way I would calculate this, so we see 8 out of 10 years. Okay, this is going to be our likelihood. Okay, so 8 divided by 10 gives me a nice 80%. So this tells me that this event is likely. And then 30 acres each year. So I have 100 acres, 30 divided by 100 equals 30%. So if I go from likely and then over to moderate, because delays up to 30% of schedule, additional cost of up to 30% of budget, this tells me that I am at a high risk. And therefore, I probably would want to purchase insurance. Okay, if I'm at a high or extreme, generally speaking, I'm more than likely going to want to purchase insurance for that year for those crops, just to make sure that everything is covered in case this event did occur, right? All right, so why don't you tackle this one on your own to see how you're doing? Feel free to use a calculator or scratch paper too. In 3 out of 7 years, there has been a drought destroying 45 acres each year. Risk level and insurance or no insurance. So hit pause, do what you got to do, and then we'll resume. All right, so now that you've calculated the risk and determined whether or not you should buy insurance, let's work through it and see how you did. So 3 out of 7 years, that would put us in the moderate range, right? Because 3 out of 7 years is going to be a little shy of 50%. And 45 acres has been destroyed each year. So that puts us into, I would say, extreme, because it delays up to 50% of schedule or additional cost of up to 50% of budget. And I would say that I would buy insurance based off of that scenario. Okay, hopefully you got that right. If not, we have a few more practice ones for you to work through. All right, do this one on your own once again. All right, so the first thing I would do is I would divide 1 over 50, and that gives me 2%. So we already know we're going to be down in this rare area. And this earthquake has destroyed an average of 6 acres each year the earthquake has occurred. So this would mean that we are probably going to be in the insignificant area or minor. So I would say the risk level is low, probably not necessary to buy insurance for your crops based only on the factor of having earthquakes, okay, especially here in Minnesota. In 4 out of 8 years, there has been an early hard frost destroying an average of 70 acres each year. Okay. Hit pause, work through it. All right. So hopefully for your risk level, you identified either catastrophic or major and likely. So it's an extreme risk level. And I would certainly purchase insurance if this is the data that you have for your farm based off of the frost, assuming that that is covered in the insurance. Okay. And I believe this is the last one. In 2 out of 7 years, there has been flooding, destroying about 60 acres each year. Hit pause, calculate risk, and determine if you should get insurance or not. All right. So hopefully 2 out of 7, again, that's going to be in our moderate area. And then 60%, we are going to find ourselves in the extreme again. So catastrophic or major, once again, I would put crop insurance on for this year as well. So you're getting the point here that farmers, generally speaking, are going to have a lot of risks. Therefore, crop insurance is a very, very important purchase that farmers need to buy basically every year if they want to make sure that they have coverage on what they are planting and they're not going to lose all of their money necessarily, and this helps kind of buffer a little bit for farmers. So crop insurance agencies are very, very important, and they do a really important job by going out and surveying different properties and working with farmers and clients to make sure that they are getting as much coverage as they need given their scenario and the data that they have presented to them. So if this is something that you liked, maybe consider a career in agricultural financing or maybe even crop insurance, because this is a very in-demand and popular field, and we definitely need a lot of workers in this area and this industry because obviously there's always going to be weather events or issues that arise, and we're going to have people willing to survey and work with farmers through navigating challenging times, especially after a flood or a tornado or a hailstorm occurs. Okay, so thanks for tuning in today. Now you're able to compare and contrast the different types of risk. You can explain how risk is applied to ag and food businesses. You can describe how insurance is a risk mitigation strategy, and you can create and justify decisions of risk using quantitative data and the risk matrix tool. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you found this to be very informative. Looking forward to diving into marginal utility with you all in the next lesson. So hang in there. Great job today, and keep on chugging.